Today's daf is daf Gimel in Makos, as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Shana Sur Masar V'Shivya. Says the Gemara, the second line in daf Gimel where we left off yesterday. Daf Gimel and Alf. Rav Yehuda Rav. Eid Zom Misham Feichalko. Eid Zom pays according to his share. Now, what do we mean by that? You might think a simple explanation could be, well, let's say Adam Zoman, A and B, we've called them, right? Come along and say, the Reuben owes Shimon $300, right? Not eight, right? $300. So you say, okay, those are $300. Then C and D come along and say that he couldn't have known about the $300 because he wasn't there. We were in St. Louis with us, okay? They were liars. So they have to pay the $300 to Reuven. They were trying to cause him to lose $300. So each guy pays $150, right? Two guys pay $150. If there were three Adam, A, B, and C, whatever it was, they split it three ways. That's the simple shot. But that's not what we mean here. I'm going to be Rav. Each guy pays half. Tanina, we're going to see that in the Mishnah coming up. Because we can see that in the Mishnah on the first day of Yontif, Sunday, that you divide up, when it comes to money, you split it, right? Wherever they wanted to be Mechayev the other guy, the defendant, whatever, Ruvain, so you split it, but not when it comes to Malchus. Let's say they're Chayev Malchus, you don't split it that way, they each get their own Malchus, that's the rule. So we should see that in the next Mishnah, so that can't be what Rav Yehuda Marav is teaching us. Elka going to Itzum Chad Minayim. Maybe this is what happened. A and B were the false witnesses, the conspiring witnesses, and only one of them was found to be a crook. You were with us in St. Louis. We don't know about the other guy. So is that maybe that's what you mean? And then he has to pay his share. Elkon did some chad minayim. Misham Palgadi pays his half. Umi Misham does he pay anything at all? It's not true. But time we learn ain Adam zomen Misham Mamon achizu mushneim. They're not Adam zomen. They cannot be declared false witnesses unless they both are found to be false witnesses. If A and B testified about somebody, and C and D come along and claim only that A, you were with us in St. Louis, they don't declare B to be a liar, then neither one of them is liar. You have to be masim all of them. So that can't be what it means either. It can't be the simple explanation that you just pay according to your share, because that's a Mishnah. It can't be that only one of them pays, because that doesn't work. Maybe this is what it means. Where A and B came along and say that they said Reuben owes Shimon $200. Then, or $300, whatever it was. Then one of them comes along and says, I lied. I was a liar. I was wrong about that. So maybe he pays his share. So Zigmar called community. Does he believe? You can't change your testimony. It doesn't work like that. You can't retract your testimony once you gave it under oath in court. It doesn't work. Ella Ba'omer maybe means this. But Ba'omer, he says this. Hey Adnu, we testified that Reuben owes Shimon $200, and Vuzamnu, and we were found to be liars. C and D came along in the same court number one, and found to be liars. Vuzamnu, Bez, and Ploni, and we ran away, and we never had to pay. But I'm admitting that I was found to be a liar. Maybe he has to pay there. If that's the case, command lo Kiva, that goes not like a Kiva. We mentioned Rabbi Kiva yesterday. We said there are four things about Adam Zomin, and Rabbi Kiva has a fifth one. Rabbi Kiva says that if he's moda al piatzmo, he doesn't have to pay. Afei mishama piatzma, meaning if one of them comes along and says, listen, or even both of them come along and say, we were found to be Adam Zomin in court number one, but we ran away before they could give us a verdict that we have to pay. We found that we didn't pay, right? Not that they never issued we were found to be liars, but we never got the verdict that we have to pay, and we ran away. Rabbi Kiva says if they come along and say there that they have to pay, that's moda b'knasas potter, because the whole idea of Adam Zomin is that they pay. It's a knas, moda b'knasas potter. So if you say over here, Rav Yehuda Marav said that Ezom Mishalim Lefi Chelko pays according to share, in this case where they're moda, he's moda on his own, that they were found to be Zomin, but moda b'kanas is potter. You don't have to pay. So how could that goes against Rabbi Kiva? Again, that's the case. Come on, lo Rabbi Kiva, Amar Afen Misham Piasma, he doesn't pay by his own admission. Only if he's found that way in court. Ella, this is what Rabbi Rav must mean. We testified against Reuven, and we were found to be liars. And Bezdin gave a verdict that we have to pay Reuven the $200. Okay, and then we ran away. Now he can't be mechayev. We don't. The court number 2 doesn't know about court number 1. They only know about it by this guy's admission. So he says, A comes along now and says, we were found to be liars, and they told us we have to pay, and we ran away. So I'm willing to pay my share now. I have a guilty conscience. I'm willing to pay my share, but he can't make B pay, because why should we believe him? Why should we believe him in court number 2? So he also doesn't have to pay by his own admission. Why is this not moda b'knas? Because once Bezdin gave a verdict and says you must pay the money, then it's an issue of money. You owe the money. It's like you go to the bailiff or whoever it is, here in Israel we call it tzal b'fal. There's a chiyuv to pay. It's no knas is when Bezdin paskin said it's a knas. But once they give you a chiyuv of mammon, it's real mammon. Says the last Rashi before. Not the last before the Mishnah. 2 Rashis before the Mishnah. The Bezdin shuzamnavu v'midanu adadlan bedin. He set us up in court. In other words, Allah's Mazan, and he said, you owe us the money. We had to pay. In other words, Bezdin said, you're Einim Zomin, you're liars. Now, in another court there, the same court, the Reuven demanded that they pay the $200 that they were trying to chayiv him. Umeahu shata, says Rashi, mamonu gabayu, it's money. He's not making himself a Rasha. The court already made him a Rasha. In other words, what's the idea? Why is Modab Knas Pata? Because it says, Asher Yashir Elohim Yisham Shnaim L'Reyehu. That's what the pasuk says. When the court finds him guilty and demands that he has to pay, then he has to pay double. But if he's motive by himself, then he doesn't pay. That's a kind of motive Knas Pata. Here the court already said you have to pay. So he's not motive. It's not like he's motive at Knas and Potter. He's not motive at Knas. Bezdin was already mechayim in the Knas. Therefore, it's a simple question of money. And therefore, he comes along and says, listen, we were found to be guilty. And we had to pay the $200 to Reuven. We never paid it yet. And I'm coming along to say that I'd like to pay my share. So Rabbi Yehuda says, you know what? He has to pay it. Why? Because he's motive b'mamon. If I come along and say, you know what? You don't know that, you don't remember it maybe, or maybe your father died and he lent me some money and I'm giving you the money. You don't say motive b'knasas potter, because that's money. I owe him the money. He owes him the money, and therefore he has to pay. So that's a case where 1A pays on his own. Next Mishnah. We testified that Yankel divorced his wife. He hasn't paid the ksuba. We testified he divorced his wife. Now he claims, I never divorced her. We're still married. I never divorced her. He says that, yeah, I saw the divorce take place, and then the get got thrown away, whatever, and you have to pay the $200. Let's say it's $200, a regular ksuba of $200. Well, now it turns out that they're liars. So what do they have to pay? What do they have to pay? They say that Yankel owes his wife $200, and they're liars. They don't have the money. They were trying to chayiv him $200, so they should have to pay $200. But eventually, they'll have to pay the money anyway. Are they causing him a loss of $200? Not exactly, because eventually you have to pay it at all, right? If what she dies first or the wife dies first, then they're causing him a loss of the whole $200 because he doesn't have to pay the ksuba. But if he divorces her or if he dies, he'd have to pay. So valo bein hayom bein lamacher sofeli ksuba, and eventually you'll have to pay the ksuba. So what do? Omdim, you assess. How much would you want to give this wife? In other words, let's say a woman wants to sell her ksuba. It says sell her ksuba. Ksuba is $200. How much will you give her for the ksuba today? Not $200, right? It's not $200. She may never get the $200. Maybe she'll die first, and she won't get the $200, right? So you're going to give something less. Maybe it's worth $50. Let's say $50. It's worth $50 on the chance that her husband will divorce her or die first, and he's willing to risk $50. In other words, he'd call today, what's the present value of that of that get, right? Or we call it, it's like we buy today options, right? It may work out, it may not work out, right? So you pay for the house. So or right, maybe she'll get divorced or widowed, or on the other hand, maybe she'll die first. You were shed a bal, her husband will inherit her, and he pays that difference. What do you mean that difference? In other words, like Rashi explains, the husband would also give her $50 today to get out of it, right? So what were you trying to cause him a loss of? You were trying to cause him a loss of $200 less the value to her of the $50. In other words, it would be like $150. That's the loss, because he himself would give $50 today to buy the ksuba from her, right? He would self give it. I'll give you $50 so that I don't have to pay the 200 later on. So the loss is really that difference. Says the Gemara. So the Gemara says right away, how do you estimate it? I'm Rav Chisda Babal. Rav Chisda says no, it's the husband. What would you pay? What would a guy go over and pay the husband for that ksuba now? What would he pay to the husband? In other words, what's it worth to the husband right now? So you'd say $150. Why? Because the husband, number one, he's eating the payros, let's say, of the karka that's mushubad to the ksuba anyway. Plus, he's a muhsik in it. He's got it right now. Maybe he'll die. Maybe he'll die or divorce her, but maybe she'll die. So presumably, they would give him a certain amount. Not clear what that amount is. Farshim say that if he has a piece of land, then you could estimate what it would be worth. That land is meshubah to the ksuba. But if it's not, hard to estimate. But you might buy what it's worth to the husband, what he would sell the rights for the ksuba for. Now you look at the woman, and Rav Papa says, Rav Papa, he adds on to Rav Nassam. He agrees with Rav Nassam. You look at it from the woman's point of view, but only the ksuba, not the nechsei malug. Remember, he's entitled to eat her nechsei malug while they're married too. And this guy was trying to say, what? You divorced your wife, you're not entitled to nechsei malug anymore. But the husband the Adam can claim, A and B, the liars can claim, we didn't know you had any nechsei malug. We know you, every man and wife have a ksuba. We were just trying to cause you the loss of the ksuba. So there's only an ksuba, and the way you determine it is to say, what is it worth it to her? In other words, what is her ksuba? If she wanted to sell the ksuba, what is it worth to her? Because there's a chance that she'll never get anything, right? If she dies first, she may never get anything, and the husband is a muhsik in the property, so maybe her present value is $50. So they were causing him a loss. He himself, the husband would pay $50 for it today too. He would pay $50 today. If a man has a ksuba on his wife and it's worth $200, right? That's what it's worth on, when it goes to term, for example, if he divorces her or he dies. But let's say he says, I'm willing to pay $50 today to you so that you can't collect the ksuba, right? She would take that. She would take that present value because she doesn't know if she'll get anything anyway eventually. So he would pay $50 today anyway for it. So you can't tell him that these Adam who tried to get him to pay the ksuba were causing him a loss of the whole 200. He would have paid 50 for it himself. The loss would only be like 150 then. And that's what they would have to pay. Another case of Adam Zom. We testify that you borrowed $1,000 that has to be repaid back within 30 days. Within 30 days. And the borrower who says, yeah, I borrowed $100,000 from this guy. He gave me 10 years to pay it back with no interest. Pretty good deal, right? Borrowed $1,000. I have 10 years to pay it back. Now the Adam Zoman, they're found to be Adam, A and B are found to be Adam Zoman. What is the loss? What is the loss? What loss did they cause him? $1,000? No, he admits he has to pay the $1,000 also, right? He's going to pay $1,000. He admits, yeah, I borrowed $1,000, but they gave me 10 years to pay it back, not 30 days. So how do you figure out what is the loss that the Adam Zoman now have to pay this borrower? You estimate, you assess how much would a person give you? In other words, we're not getting into interest here. He's not paying interest, but what would you pay? Let's say I owe somebody $1,000 and I got to pay within 30 days. How much would I pay somebody in theory that he should give me 10 years to pay it back? Now, if I'm paying him more money now directly, that would be rebid, right? But in theory, how much would you pay to get an extension? How much would you pay for that? Let's say $100, $50, whatever, $200, whatever it pays. That's the amount of his loss. Because that's what's worth. Really, the borrower only has 30 days. So the borrower only has 30 days to pay it back. Now, if I pay him more money now directly, that would be rebid, right? But in theory, how much would you pay to get an extension? How much would you pay for that? Let's say $100, $50, whatever, $200, whatever it pays. That's the amount of his loss. Because that's what's worth. Really, the borrower only has 30 days. I mean, he has 10 years to pay, rather. 10 years to pay. But you were trying to limit that period of the loan to 30 days. Well, how much would it be worth normally? He has 10 years to pay and he doesn't pay any interest. But what would it be worth to extend the loan for 30 days to 10 years? How much would that be? X amount. The use of the money, right? How much? Exactly. How much? Now, if you're paying it directly to somebody to extend it, that's rebate. But here we're not dealing with that. The 10 year, the loan is for $1,000 for 10 years, interest free. There's no interest. But what would a person be willing to pay to extend a loan without interest from 30 days to 10 years? The guy would probably be willing to pay something for that, right? It's worth money. He can use the money. He could use the $1,000 for 10 years. So that's what the Adam Zoman have to pay. I'm Rabbi Shmuel. Let's say you lend money out to somebody for 10 years. Shvius Mishamtaso. Does Shvius cancel the debt? Now, if you lend money for 10 years, obviously Shemitah has to intercede somewhere, right? For 10 years, you got a Shemitah in there somewhere, right? So does Shemitah not cancel the debt or not? So Rabbi Shmuel first says, and we'll see that's not the case. Shvius cancels that. Why? He goes, when it says, when we say that Shemitah says, by Shemitah we say, well, you can't demand the money. So even though it's not demanded right now, but so for us today, but eventually, ultimately, it will be a case where you demand the money after 10 years. And since when you demand the money and Shemitah passes in between when you're going to demand the money, Shemitah cancels the debt. Okay. Masr Rav Kana asks the kasha on this. We'll see this is not the way we come out with. Masr Rav Kana, look at our case in the Mishnah. We said, how much would a person be willing to give? We just said in the Mishnah, what is the loss? In other words, what is the amount that the Adam Zoman have to pay the borrower for claiming that he owes the money in 30 days instead of 10 years? The difference that a person would be willing to wait, how much would a person pay to extend the loan for that, 10 years minus 30 days? How much are we willing to pay for that? Wait a minute. But if 10 years pass, you won't have to pay the loan at all, right? If you say Shemitah cancels the debt for 10 years, you have to pay the whole thing. What happened? Adam B said, you owe $1,000 in 30 days. He says, I only owe it after 10 years. After 10 years, you won't have to pay anything because Shemitah knocked it off. So therefore, what's the loss that is incurred by these Adam Zoman? The full $1,000. Because they say you owe the money in 30 days. He says, I owe it in 10 years, which means I don't owe anything, right? If you say that, if after 10 years, the Shemitah knocks it off, so then he doesn't pay anything. So he should pay the whole thing. You shouldn't have to pay the difference, what you'd be willing to extend, let's say $200. $200 is what I would be willing to pay to extend the loan. No, you should have to pay the whole $1,000 because this guy wouldn't have to pay that loan at all. No, that's different. Speaking where the loan was with a mashkon, with collateral. And when there's a loan with collateral, Shemitah doesn't knock it off. Understand? Shemitah only knocks it off. Why? Because the whole idea is you can't demand the money. But if I have a mashkon, I don't have to demand the money. If I lend you money, I lend you $100, and you gave me your car as a mashkon, I don't have to demand it. You want your car, come and pay it back. So there's no demanding there. Or Moshe Shras Lebezin. What do we do every 7 years? Kruzbul. You give the star to the Bezin. Remember, any 3 idiots of us, we become the Bezin, right? Either one. Either you gave a mashkin or a prusla that's man. I'm a mashkin. If you lent the money and you got a collateral, then Shemitah doesn't knock it off. Okay, so that's how we answered this case. Going with the idea that Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, notice that the author of this memra was Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel. Notice Rabbi Yehuda, because we're going to say a lot of things that Rabbi Yehuda said. But now the Gemara reverses it. Some say the other way around. Remember Shmuel? If you lend it for 10 years, Shvius doesn't knock it off because it's not due. When the Shemitah knock off a loan, when the loan is due and you're making a demand, give me my money back. When the loan is due, but it's not due yet. So the reverse of what he said before. That's the halacha. Because even though eventually you'll demand it, it'll come to a case of don't demand it. Right now, when Shemitah happened in the middle of the 10 years, at the 6th year, the first year, the second year, any of the years that happened between now and the 10 years, right now, he's not demanding it. Rav Kana. So now Rav Kana said about that, well, maybe we can bring a proof to that from our Mishnah. Rav Kana Hafanan Mitanina Umdam Kamar Matzidin Bi Elvus Bi Arabein Litin Bi Kan Bad Lam Yom Ubein Litin Bi Kan Bad Sashanim. Our Mishnah. How much would a person be willing to do to extend the loan to up to 10 years and pay that? If Shmias would knock it off, we'd have to pay the whole thing. Elamites right that Shemitah does not knock off a 10-year loan. So Rav says that's no right. You can't prove it from our Mishnah. Same answer. Maybe he was like with a collateral, or most of Shas Bezin where it was a principal. The if you lend money with collateral, or you made a principal, so Shemitah doesn't like. So Rabbi Shmuel said that idea that if you lend out money, and you lend the money for a period that extends greater than the next Shemitah. Let's say Shemitah's next year, let's say it's in 3 years, whatever. It's in 3 years, and you lend the money for 5 years. So the Shemitah doesn't knock off the loan. Okay, that was one thing that Rabbi Yehuda said. Another thing Rabbi Yehuda said, Omer Shmuel, let's say he says, listen, Shmuel says, he's saying, Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda learned by Rav, he learned by Shmuel. And he said like this, Shmuel said that if you tell somebody, I'm lending you money, Almanas, that you can't, Shemitah won't knock off the loan. I'm lending you money now. You owe me the money almost immediately, but Shemitah comes on the condition that Shemitah will not knock it off. Huh? Oh, so that's the question. So Shvius Mishametes, he says, anyway, Shemitah knocks it off. You can't make such a condition. Shmuel, why? Why does Shmuel say that? Because yes, you're making a condition against the Torah. To no bottle. And we had a machlokas. Rabbi Yehuda says when it comes to money matters, it could be bottle, like it can be mocha, whatever. But we're not discussing it now. Now we're saying to no bottle. So Shmuel says you can't make a condition against the Torah. We learn. I'm selling you this item on the condition that you have no claim of fraud against me. What's no? If I'm selling it for more than 1/6 difference, 1/6 over manufacturer's suggested retail price, that's a fraud. So he says, I'm selling you this, but don't come to me with a claim of fraud. Why does it work? Rav says, Yesh lo no. You could still have such a claim because you can get the Torah. There's no no there because I made such a condition. So you see, you could make a condition against the Torah. So how could you say Shmuel holds you can't make a condition against the Torah? You can make it against the Torah. Right? The answer is no. Ravanan said, I heard from Shmuel directly that this is the deal. He said, listen, I'm selling it to you on the condition. I know I'm price gouging here. I'm selling a condition that you have no claim. I know manufacturer suggested retail is 10,000. I'm charging you 15,000. I don't care. Do you agree to that? You can agree to it, and that's not bottle. But he says, listen, I'm selling you on the condition that if there's no fraud here, it's a good deal. I'm selling you on the condition that there's no fraud. Then there is fraud. If there's on the condition, but there is fraud. I'm selling you on the condition that there's no here. Take it from me. I'm a good salesman. Take it from me. You're getting a good deal. And then you didn't get a good deal. Then that's a complaint. So Hanami, it depends how you word it. If you say on the condition that you have no claim against me of no, that means you're mochel it. If you're mochel, you can mochel money. You can be mochel. That you have no claim of fraud against me. So you have no claim for fraud. You agree to that. You know that the price could be high. You agree to it. On the condition that there is no fraud in this deal, there is fraud in the deal, then there is a no. Hachanami in our case too. I'm selling you on the condition, I know Shemitah is going to knock off the loan if you don't pay me back by Shemitah. But I'm telling you, you're going to pay back anyway. That's what Shmuel says. Even though Shemitah is knocked off, you agree to pay me anyway. Shmias should not knock off my loan. Shmias does knock it off, but you agree to pay me anyway. You can do that. On the condition that Shemitah doesn't work against me, that Shemitah will not knock off the loan, then it's like if it's almanas that you don't knock me, that you don't that you agree that you won't use Shemitah to knock off the loan, then Shvius doesn't knock off the loan. Almanash lo tishmetain shvius, that shvius should knock off a loan, and shvius does not. In other words, Shmuel does say you can't make a deal against the Torah conditions, but if the guy agreed to a money matter, you could agree, like we said, like Rabbi Yehuda says that a man marries his wife on the condition that he's not going to support her, right? So that he's not going to have relations with her. He can't make such a condition. That's considered tsar haguf. But on the condition that she's mochel the money, mochel the food, you don't have to support me. She could say, listen, in today's market, she makes more money than him. He's a teacher and she's on the stock market or something, So she says, I don't need your money. That's okay. You can make such a deal because it's when it comes to money, you can make sure. Tana, another one. If you lend some money to somebody, stam, how long is a loan for? If you didn't specify, you can't demand the money less than 30 days. Again, this was said in front of Rav. That's only if it was done by a shtar, you had a written IOU. Because of shtar, the guy's not going to write an IOU for a loan that's less than 30 days. But if it's a oral loan, it doesn't have to be 30 days. He can demand the money anytime he wants. This is what my uncle, Chabibi, my uncle Rav Chia said. Whether it was, doesn't make a difference if it was a loan, a written loan, or an oral loan. The same thing applies, 30 days. You can't demand a loan for 30 days. And you didn't specify how long it's for. You can't demand the money less than 30 days. So Shmuel said to Rav Masna, not Rav, but Shmuel said to Rav Masna, don't sit down until you explain the reason for this. For this teaching. Where do we get this idea that where do we get this idea that if I lend you money, I can't demand it less than 30 days? I lend you money today. You need some money. I can't come to you the next day and say, give me the money back, or a week later. I got to give you 30 days. Where do we get that from? But whether it was a written loan or an oral loan, so if Mas answers, it says like this. The pasuk says, if it's getting close to Shemitah, you're going to be cheap. You're not going to lend money out because you're afraid you won't be able to collect it. So it says over there, the year of the seventh year, the year of Shemitah is coming. It says the seventh year is coming in a day. I know the seventh year is Shemitah. Why does it have to say Shemitah? There's another kind of a year, another kind of a Shemitah. There's another kind of Shemitah where the loan is not fully canceled, but you can't collect it for a certain amount of time. What's that? You can't collect for less than 30 days. Why? We've learned elsewhere that 30 days in a year is sometimes considered, let's say by our law, when you can't eat for 3 years, 30 days in a year is already considered a full year. So we find in other places that 30 days a year. So he says, what's the source that 30 days is the normal amount of time that a loan is given for, unless otherwise specified? If I specify, you got to give me the loan back by this afternoon, then I so specify. But if I didn't specify 30 days, where do we get that from? From Karva Shnas Hashita, Shnas Hashev, Shnas Hashmita. The word Shemitah is extra. But there's another kind of a year that we're talking about where it's sort of canceled. It's 30 days because 30 years is also called a year. And that's what we mean over here. Shnas Hashmita means that the 30th, that this cancellation, there's another kind of a cancellation where a loan is, so to speak, canceled for a period of 30 days. Now we're going to get to other things. This is all brought down because Rav Yehuda Marav said it the first thing when it comes to the loan that we talked about with Yom Zomin. So he tells us now another halacha. Remember, Shabbos. Let's say you have a new shirt. In those days, in the olden days, they didn't have 14 and a half, 14 and 3/4, 15 and a quarter, the neck size of your shirt. You bought a standard shirt and you ripped it open a little bit more when you need it. Can you rip it open on Shabbos? No. You open up the neck so you can put your head in there on Shabbos. For ripping. You ripped it open, not for ripping really specifically, but for fixing a kli. This was a garment as a kli. Shetikin kli. You fixed the kli, right? So why is this brought down over here? As we'll see, because just like before, Rav Yehuda said something in the name of Shmuel, and then Rav Kana asked him on that. The first thing that we started with after the Mishnah, if you lend the money for 10 years, the Shmiya to knock it off. And then Rav Kana asked him a kasha from our Mishnah. So here also we're going to have that Rav Yehuda said something, and Rav Kana asked him a kasha. So he said, how is this different than opening up the stopper of a barrel so you could take out the wine on Shabbos or the barrel of beer, whatever it was, that you're allowed to do that? One is attached, one's not attached. In other words, the garment is one piece of cloth. You're ripping it up and you're making a cleat. Whereas in the case of the stopper on the barrel, it is attached, but it's like, even if it's cemented in there, but it's a separate unit. It's not part of the barrel itself. Whereas here, this is part of the shirt. You're ripping it open. Another halacha, the Rav said, I'm going to be Rav, the Rav Yehuda said, before it was, we had Rav Yehuda Rav Shmuel, now it's Rav Yehuda Rav, but it's halacha that Rav Yehuda said, not Rebbe Yehuda, the Tana, Rav Yehuda, the Amor we're talking about. Shoshas look at mine, shenafel l'tochem. A log of water is about 6 eggs worth, whatever that is. Okay, so now here's the deal. When it comes to a mikveh, we know a mikveh has to have 40 saw, right? Once it has 40 saw, then if you add stuff to it, even stuff that's not good for a mikveh, not the natural water, but rather mayim shuvin. Mayim shuvin means it came from a kli, like faucet, turning on a faucet of water. Once it had 40 saw, it's fine. You can add on to it, no problem, as much as you want. If it doesn't have 40 saw, and you put in a little bit of tap, we'll call it tap water, mine shouldn't tap water. Tap water, if it's 3 logan, ruins the mikveh. If it doesn't have 40 saw yet. Notice you had 40 saw, less 3 logan, and you completed it with 3 logan of tap water, that ruins it. So here's like this. Let's say it's shlosh logan mayim, shenafel tochen kotev yain. Let's say a small amount, a few drops of yain kortov is like 1/64th of a log. So if you have 3 logan and 1 quart of yain is 1/192nd of a log. It's a few drops, right? Few drops that you threw in there of wine. Now, if you have clear water, it's not that much. It's like 18 eggs worth of water, and you pour it in a few drops of wine, good wine. Sometimes that could discolor the water, and it looks like diluted wine. Okay? The mikvah is not disqualified. The mikvah is still kosher. Why? You put in 3 logan of my tap water, but the tap water had the color of wine. The rule of the 3 logan of mayim shuvin of tap water ruins the mikvah. It's only if it looks like water. It's water, it's tap water, and it looks like water. But here it looks like wine, it doesn't ruin it. So says Rav Yehuda Marav. Maskan of Kana, so another kasha of Rav Rav Kana again asked the kasha of Yehuda. How is that different than colored water? Like say water that was dyed. The term Rabbi Yossi Omer made seva postlin a mikvah b'shloshes lukin. If it's 3 logan of tap water that had some coloration in it, some dye, it's no good. Only rubber hasamite. It's there. It's called water. It's called discolored water. Here it's called diluted wine. In other words, the Isser that the Chum said that if you have a mikveh that is less than 40 saw and you put 3 logan of tap water in there, is only if it's called water, tap water. Here it's called diluted wine. Wine is okay. Doesn't ruin the mikveh. You have to have 40 saw still. You have to have 40 saw. Pardon?
It's rusty water.
It's rusty, yeah, but it looks like wine. Wine doesn't ruin the water. Now you could say you don't like that. That's a machlokas. We're going to have a machlokas about it in a minute. But Rav's opinion is that doesn't ruin the mikveh. Vatan Rav Chia, Rav's own uncle said, Haridus a mikveh. That in that case, they disqualified the mikveh. They said it's no good. Amarabalo kasha. Harbi Achmanuri Rabbanan. There's a machlokas here. We're going to see. Rav went like Rabbi Achmanuri, who says, look at the color. If the color is wine, it's wine. And if it's not 3 logan water. And other ones are like Rabbanan. Ditnan. We have the Mishnah. Shosh logan mayim chaser kartov. Let's say you have 3 logan mayim less a kartov, meaning you don't have 3 logan. 3 logan only ruins the water, ruins the mikveh. If the mikveh doesn't have 40 saw yet, and you have full 3 logan. Here it's you have less than 3 logan. If you have 2 logan or 2.5 logan or 2 logan and 99 100ths of another log, that doesn't ruin the mikveh. So here you had that. You had 2 plus 99 100ths, let's say, of mayim shuvin. Shenafel tochen kortiv and wine fell in there. Right? It looks like wine. But nafel mikveh lo paslu. It doesn't ruin it. Why? Because it didn't have 3 logan of water. You see, the Tanakama here doesn't go like Rav.
Because he says you have to have 3 logan. Because you have to have the shear of 3 logan. And to ruin the mikvah, to disqualify, you have to have 3 logan of mayim shuvin. Here the Tanakama says, no, you didn't have 3 logan. Some wine fell in. It's not possible. Same thing. Let's say a kortav fell in. You had two almost 3 log, but not 3 log. A little bit less than 3 log of regular water, tap water, that fell in some milk. Now, when milk falls into that amount, it's clear. You don't see white in the milk. It doesn't look white. It looks like wine. Why? Because you didn't have 3 logan of mayim shuvin. Mayim shuvin means tap water. Here you had a little bit less than 3 logan, and you had some wine added up in there, or you had some milk in there. Whether it looks like wine or it doesn't look like wine, here it's clear. It looks like water, right? It's not possible. Why? Because the Tanakhama says in order to possible it, you need both the shear and you need the look. Well, here in the second case, where the milk fell in, a few drops of milk fell in, you have the look of water, but you don't have the shear of water. Okay, so he said the Tanakhama here says you need both. Okay, and that would be like the shita. But let's say according to this shita, it says chaser kortav. Again, the first 2 words of the Mishnah are chaser. It's missing a kortav. But if you had 3 logan of water, even if the wine fell in, it would possible it. That's the shita of Rav Chia, who goes like the shita of the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, Rav will go like Rabbi Yochanan Nuri. Omer hakol alecha amara. No, you look at you don't care even if it's 3 logan of mayim shuvin, like Rav said before. You had 3 logan of mayim shuvin, which would possible it if it fell in that way. But if a few drops of wine fell in and it looks like wine, now it's wine falling into the mikveh. It doesn't ruin the mikveh. You look at the Mara. So therefore, Rav will go like Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, and the Tanakhama will say no. It only ruins it. It ruins it if you had a shear of 3 log, a shear of 3 log, either a shear of 3 log, whether a shear of 3 log ruins it, whether it looked like wine or it didn't look like wine, whether it looked like water or not. If you have 3 log of mayim shuvin, it ruins it according to the Tanakhama, because he says chaser kartav. The reason it doesn't possible it's only because you don't have 3 log. You don't have 3 log. So whether you had a drop of wine which discolors it, or a drop of milk which doesn't discolor it, either way it doesn't ruin because you don't have 3 logan. But if you would have 3 logan, then it would ruin it. That's not like Rav. Rabbi Yochanan says amara. Even if you had 3 logan, you look at the way it looks. It says the Gemara, Vahami boy, Rav Papa. Rav Papa wasn't sure about that. The boy Rav Papa, Rav Tani Chaser Kartav. Did Rav learn this Mishnah? This is a Mishnah in Chulin, Shlosh Logan 9. Did Rav learn the Mishnah that it says Chaser Kartav, like the first 2 words on this page? Chaser Kartav Bereisha. Avol Shlosh Logan, the Tanakama Pasli would passel it. Whether you add in drops of water or drops of wine. It goes according to Mar. For Rav da Omar, Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, is that the pshat like we're learning now? The Rav goes like Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, and Rav Chia, his uncle, went like the Rabbanan. Odilma, Rav lo tani chaser karta b'reisha. He doesn't make chaser karta. He says you have 3 logan of mayim, and a drop of some water fell, and drop of wine, few drops of wine fell, and looks like wine. That wouldn't ruin it. That would be like Rav. So then Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, keep pulling a sefer. Rabbi Yochanan was only arguing on the sefer, because the sefer said what? The sefer said that it doesn't say chaser kartav. It says if you have 3 logan of water that a drop of milk fell into, Rabbi Yochanan would say, well, it goes according to the look of it. Since it looks like water, it's no good. It looks like 3 logan of mayim, and the Tanakama would say no. If you have 3 logan of mayim with some milk mixed in there, it would be okay. So he's only arguing the safe of Rav. Rav is going like everybody. Rav says if it has a look of water, it's water. If it has a look of wine, it's wine, even if it's 3 log. And according to this, Rav can even go like the Tanakama, because do you say that maybe Rav doesn't learn Chaser Kartav in the Reisha? And he says the Reisha also means that you have 3 logan of water, which would ruin it by itself, but some drops of wine fell in, so therefore it looks like wine, and it doesn't pass us. So says the Tanakama. So maybe Rav is only arguing, Rav is not arguing with the Tanakama or with Rabbi Yochanan when it comes to the wine. So maybe he wasn't sure. So how can you say that the machlokas here between Rav and Rav Chia, his uncle, is the same as the machlokas of Rav Yochanan and Rabbanan? According to this, but Rav Papa wasn't sure how to learn this Mishnah. The way we have the Mishnah Chaser Kartav, yes. Rav goes like a Rech Menuri, Rav Chia goes like the Tanakama. But according to Rav Papa's question, he wasn't sure if Chasar Tartav was in there or not. And if it doesn't say Chasar Tartav, Rav could even go like the Tanakama. So the answer is V'Rav Damak Devekol. The answer is Rav Papa Boile. Rav Papa had this question, but Rav Pshitle, Rav was pasha to him the way that he had the mission the way we read it in our Gemara, that the Tanakama says it's only good when the wine fell in. It looks like wine because he didn't have full 3 log of water. But if you'd have 3 log of water, it wouldn't be good. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, even if you have 3 log of tap water and some wine fell in and it looks like wine, that doesn't ruin the mikvah because wine fell in, not logan. The look of the wine takes away the psul of shlosha lugan mayim, which is only an isur drabanan anyway. It's only an isur drabanan. But if it looks like wine, then it's not considered tap water. It's not considered ma'an shumin and doesn't ruin the mikvah. Of course, we're only, like we said, we're only speaking about a mikvah that didn't have 40 saw before. But once they had 40 saw, it doesn't make any difference what you throw in there. All right, so we'll pick it up. Amar Yosef. It starts tomorrow's daf. Again, as usual, tomorrow's daf and Sunday's daf, first day of Pesach, will be on the podcast. And on Monday, Mirz Hashem, we'll start from the Gemara on Daf Vav. If you look in the Gemara, if you turn to Daf Vav, you'll see there's a Mishnah that goes from Hey to Vav. We'll start from the Gemara right after the Mishnah on the, the 6th line on Daf Vav on Monday morning. Remember, on Monday, next week, Chalamoid, we daven at 6 o'clock each day. Shabbat Shalom, v'chag kosher sameach l'kulam.
Chag kosher sameach. Thank you, everyone. Okay.